Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Sarah and I'm the Program Event Manager at the Reactor in Sydney, Australia. Welcome to a Microsoft Reactor live stream event. Today I would like to welcome back Jorge Arteiro and Scott Coulton. Firstly, a bit of background on your speakers. So Jorge is a cloud developer advocate for containers based in Melbourne, Australia, with 20 years in the tech industry. As a former Microsoft MVP, he developed a passion to help and sponsor the community to get into the tech industry, to learn how to collaborate and share their own knowledge with others. And we have Scott here as well, who is a developer advocate and Docker captain with 10 years of experience as a software engineer in the managed services and hosting space. Today, they'll be discussing new product releases from both KubeCon and Microsoft Ignite on the containers and cloud native space. You will see I've added a check-in link for today there with the event code 14767. So please do check in for today, where you'll find additional resources provided by both Jorge, Scott, and Microsoft. We'll be speaking for about an hour with 10 minutes for questions. However, do put your questions in the Q&A section throughout, and we'll try and answer as many as possible. Also, just a reminder that this session is being recorded and it is live streamed now, so it'll be going up on the YouTube channel straight after today. So if there's anything that you missed, just go click on that Reactor YouTube channel and you can watch the on-demand version back again. But without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor over to Jorge and Scott to begin. So thank you very much to you both, and over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate. Welcome, Scott.
Hello. Good to be here, George. How are you this morning?
Very good, very good. Good to have you and be, doing this talk together for the first time. I joined Scott team back in July, and we are part of the Cloud Advocate team on the cloud native containers, including containers, Kubernetes, Linux. And we decided to have this talk to discuss a little bit what's new on coming from Ignite, coming from KubeCon in the last few weeks. And selecting some, things to talk today, Scott, we pick, let's say, 3 or 4 main subjects or main points that we want to, bring and discuss. And we are open for questions, I think, as well. People from the community want to ask something. Is the first one that came from KubeCon, I think was WASM, WebAssembly, for AKS or for Kubernetes. You can use it on Kubernetes, but now we have these integrated on Azure Kubernetes Service. Then you can have node pools on Azure Kubernetes Service. We're going to talk a little bit about that one. I think that's the first one that probably came on KubeCon.
Yeah, so this is first of all, we should probably talk about why. Why would you want to do WASM? Is this going to replace containers? That's a lot of questions that we get asked. And the very simple answer is no, it's not going to replace containers. There's always going to be workloads for containers, but what this allows you to do is extend your application set to be able to use smaller bytes of code, and also smaller bytes of code across smaller devices. So when we're really starting to look at things like edge computing, you can start to compile your WASM applications down to P code, and then they will work and be controlled by Kubernetes on devices that are a lot smaller than you can run containers on. And what we're seeing out in the with some test customers is like we're talking real small chips, like 200 megs is all the chip has. So to run a container runtime and then run a container, this is not going to be really work. The other thing is, if you have a lot of small processes that need to run, the scaling of WASM is a lot more efficient than containers. And also the cold start is a lot more efficient. We do know, sorry, I've got a bit of a choked up throat from being sick last week. we do know that this is like really bleeding edge. So this is not something that we'd say to you jump wholeheartedly in and go for, but definitely something that we would love for you to try out, because we do understand there is a lot of rough edges around Bosom at the moment. We have built some open source tooling to allow some of these things to be a lot easier. So we've got what is, for all instances, all intensive purposes, an Ingress controller that allows you to find things on Bosom called Wagi, which is basically very similar to a PHP what was it? WAG or CGI Ingress kind of ruling. So we would really like to get people testing this out, and also seeing where the rough edges are. If it's in the developer experience side, definitely ping me and George, because that's what we will be working on. If it's on the actual Wasm side, you can also ping me and George, and we'll get you in touch with the product team that's working on this. But basically,
Yep.
to give you the architecture, is there an architecture doc on this page, George? I believe
Yeah, I'm
there is.
sharing here that's the explaining how to create like a node pool on AKS, and that's showing in preview. Maybe on Krustlet. Yeah.
So basically, this is the open source runtime of Krustlet. And basically what Krustlet does is it sits as a container runtime almost, and interfaces with the CRAG components, but allows you to spin up Wasm instead of containers. And as you can see, this is the open source version of it. It works on all Kubernetes clusters. I'll actually, if you're interested in getting it up and running really quickly, I have built a instance on multipass that will allow you to run Krustlet straight away and test out Wasm without having to go into the install. I'll just put it here in the chat.
And if people don't know, Krustlet is a CNCF project. Is sandbox on CNCF. Means that, like Scott said, they can run on any Kubernetes cluster. What we did on Azure now is bringing that as a node pool in preview on AKS.
So some benefits that you'll get out of Wasm over containers, that could be a workload that you possibly would like to run on it, is something that you need ultimate isolation for. So the Wasm sandbox is a lot better for security than containers at the moment. So if you need ultimate segregation between processes running, Wasm could be a good place to start. There's a whole other reason why you would run Wasm, and as I said, this will spin it up. If you've got, just install Canonical's multipass on your machine, so you can install that on Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, and this will pretty much spin up a server using Cloud Init. If you have a preferred cloud provider, you can actually take this Cloud Init and run it in that cloud provider. So this will run it up on Azure. It'll basically spin up a Krustlet server for you, and allow you to interact with the Kubernetes cluster that just runs on micro K8s, and you can run with the open source version of Krustlet and try Wasm. To get up and started on Wasm as well, we've also created a generator that allows you to generate code for Wasm. I'll just get the link here.
That's the open source. If someone want to try not just on AKS, but want to try Krustlet somewhere, and if you want to try on AKS, you can follow. I put on the share here as well.
So to get up and start up and running as well with Bosom on, we've got your Bosom. This is a generation, so it's very similar to the extension generator for VS Code, but instead this does Bosom workloads for you. We've got a whole heap of it's built in NPM. We've got a whole heap of templates there for different languages. We're adding more as we go. At the moment, the only major one that isn't supported here is Go, Tiny Go, and we're working on that in this team at the moment. So this is as I said, really cutting edge stuff. We're really trying to push this to see if this will gain legs. We really think that there's a space in the ecosystem where containers just are not the right tool to do certain workloads, and Bosom will be the future there. But as I said earlier, we definitely don't believe that Bosom will replace containers. So if you're sitting there thinking, listening to this, going, "Oh, I've just like containers. We've just got all our tooling. We've just migrated all these workloads across." That's not what we're trying to say. Where we definitely think that this is almost like functions versus containers talk. But if you want to have a control plane to run everything, then Bosom could be a good choice for you. If you already have a lot of Kubernetes clusters, you already have node pools on Azure, you can add extra node pools and then different workloads to give you flexibility to also achieve business goals. But yeah, that's the one thing that a lot of people, when they're first seeing this, is just like, is this the next thing? Is containers gone? 100% containers are not gone. Containers are not old tech. This is just looking at flexibility of workloads and giving you more options to achieve business goals with your application, like batch processing, even batch processing, machine learning, we've been able to do in the browser with Bosom. So there's a whole heap of flexibility that you can give there to your application, and it's just a different tool for different jobs. So we just want to make sure that that's clear, that we're not trying to replace containers at all. We are just trying to add functionality into Kubernetes to give you more control over, as we said, over what you can deploy and the flexibility there.
Yeah, I think that's important to be clear. That's giving option. I think giving more options, and we bringing that as a preview, and I think got some attention. People are playing and trying that, but we're showing here one AKS and also on the open source space. You can even something here, Scott, that when you show me that your main is some nice thing people are using with Bosom as well here.
Oh yeah, Hippo.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do have another open source project called Hippo, and basically it's a web interface and portal for provisioning Bosom instances. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that we have got applications as well that allow you to push Bosom P code into an OCI registry to be able to use that as like a standardized way to store your code. So you'll have your containers in there, and you could have your Bosom packages as well. So that's been implemented into OCI as well. So with Hippo, Hippo is a developmental workflow that allows you to visualize everything happening. I'll just get the URL for Hippo now.
Yeah, I got here.
Yep. So yeah, Hippo allows you to. This is open source as well. This doesn't need to run on Kubernetes. This can run on a server. It uses Krustlet away from Kubernetes, and shows it running as a single instance. But it's, as it says, is a platform as a service. It allows you to tie all the pieces together and run Hippo, run Bosom really quickly without hitting too many rough edges that Bosom has. Like, so a lot of things have been hit here. One thing that we will note, there's a massive call out that Bosom doesn't work with the CNI plugin for Azure yet, and that's because Bosom hasn't got a network interface ratified yet upstream in the actual Linux Foundation or the Bytecode Foundation. I forget which one it's in. So just see that there's an issue there. We are working on CNI support, but we need to get upstream, some work done in the upstream Bosom.
Yeah, you have to use Kubernetes, I think. Yeah, that's the first, I think, big thing. And because now I can deploy these as a node pool, we also create a new feature called start-stop node pools. Means that if you want to have a separate node pool just for Bosom, but you want to stop that, to not be charged, I can stop your node pools. We used to stop the whole cluster. Now I can just stop a specific node pool. Yeah, that's on AKS. That's bringing more flexibility. But another thing I saw was I want to talk a little bit here, Scott, is that cluster extensions you can have.
Yep.
And the difference from cluster extension to add-ons is that the add-on is just we manage the whole thing. We install. We always keep the latest version. With the extension, you're going to be able to manage that yourself, and using like ARM templates or Azure Resource Manager. And you can do like updates and deletes of those extensions. That's bringing AKS closer to the Azure Arc enable Kubernetes, where you can install extensions on any clusters that are in on-premise or the cloud. With Azure Arc, you can enable this cluster on Azure Arc, and you can manage the cluster from there. And that's why they have clusters extension. Now we bring extensions to AKS as well. And there are two extensions at the moment that you can have. There's Azure Machine Learn and DAPA. And that's the difference. You're going to use ARM, Resource Manager to install that and manage that installation from there. The nice one, like on the machine learn, you can see they're going to install all those components. They're even going to tell you what's going to be deployed. Some things will be running on the Kubernetes environment, and as a deployment, as a daemon set, and some things will be running on Azure itself as machine learn. And there's some dependence still on the machine learn. Some stage you're going to probably remove all those dependencies to be fully on Kubernetes, but it's a hybrid at the moment.
And also, for anyone that doesn't know what DAPA is, the Distributed Application Framework, I had just put the link for DAPA in the chat, so you can follow what DAPA is if you haven't heard of it before. But we will be talking about DAPA further when we speak about other announcements as well.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Then you have this extension that I think is going to grow over time. You'll be bringing more things. It's kind of other, micro or Kubernetes distribution, Scott, where you have the core Kubernetes, then you start installing kind of applications or workloads. But that's more, you are managing the lifecycle yourself. It's not just like add-on where you install and the AKS team is going to maintain. You're going to fully always keep the latest version. This one, you have more control on the version and how do you want to keep updating or not.
Yeah,
I think that's the difference.
Oh, sorry, George. So I was going to say, it gives you flexibility more like Lego blocks. So you get your stock standard AKS cluster, then you can start taking the blocks of what you want and the versions, and then layer them on top to give your Kubernetes cluster a lot more flexibility. So yeah, I have to say that this is going to be big going forward. We'll have a lot more extensions coming coming out for multiple services, I imagine, because it's going to be up to a lot of customers will obviously be wanting different things, and Dapper and machine learning are the first two off the cabs off the rank. But I foresee that this will be the way that we'll move forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about giving more options, and we know in technology we have each one using different kind of technologies, and we open all. Dapper was donated to CNCF, together with KDA for scaling, and now we're going to come and discuss maybe Scott container apps. That's the big probably announcement from Ignite on our space, at least.
Yeah, this is something I'm super excited for, because I think like in the market we had a massive gap between, well, at least in the container space, between ACI, so the single container instance, and Kubernetes, and there was a lot of customers saying like, we need something in between. We don't have the need for a Kubernetes cluster. We might want to run an application with only a handful of containers or pods. Or we want to run something that scales to 0, but there was no way to really do that in any of the Azure infrastructure. So a lot of people have been thinking about this, and this is the solution that we've come up with that I'm super excited about, because not only does it gives you like the scaling, the service discovery, and the proxying that you'll get out of Kubernetes without having to worry about the cluster underneath.
Yeah, I agree. Give all those, flexibility, and that's where those CNCF projects, Dapper and KDA, come in place. And KDA to help on the, the way that we scale based on events, event driven. And KDA, if you don't know, KDA is a project that we started and donated. And we have metrics and ways to scale, not just on Azure, based on Azure service, but based on any on-premise or the clouds service as well. And then you can see the kind of scalers, say WSQ, Azure Blob Storage, then
even AWS. We've got AWS
here.
SQSQ.
Yep. Azure Pipelines that I was playing with that, and
Google Cloud Platform there.
Good.
And then we got the cloud native ones, like there is Prometheus, which is the one that I use most when I build things, because I know Prometheus, so that's the scaling metric that I use. But there's pretty much one for most things in there. And if there's not, you can go to the GitHub repo and suggest a different one, and the community or the team will look and see if enough people ask for it. We can build it. But building one, there's tutorials on how to build like metrics collectors in Keta as well.
Yeah, and then on the container apps, what we did, we got the KDA and say, let's bring a serverless experience for using KDA. You can use KDA now on any Kubernetes cluster. But how can we, because container apps is based on Kubernetes, means that we have a control plane running on Kubernetes that you don't have to care, is a fully serverless product. But we need to bring the idea of container apps to bring microservice and event-driven scaling and security things out of the box for the user without have to care about any Kubernetes complexity or management. And you can see they have scalers like out of the box, like for HTTP, based on concurrent requests. You can have any of those custom ones that we discussed. We just saw on KDA, and like Scott said, that's just going to grow and grow over time because open source. You can do it yourself, like CPU, memory, and it's very flexible the way that we did. means that you just have to create your service, tell the kind of scaling that you want, and behind the scene you're going to use SCADA. And anything
And
that's coming on the future versions, you're going to bring and it will be available as well.
And then you can see there as well that the default value for minimum replicas is 0. So if you do have a need to scale to 0, that then you can do so. So you can have an application fully spin up when on demand off something on like Azure Service Bus. So you might have something running in your Kubernetes cluster that sends an event to the bus or event grid, and then you can start scaling this application up from 0. Once this application is finished, it can scale back down to 0. So it allows you to have a fully burstable infrastructure that you can add onto your Kubernetes cluster or other services in Azure, or it can run standalone as well. So that's super exciting.
It is. And you can see there is a tutorial that I helped to write here. Is about background processing. It's all about scaling to 0 as well. How can we create an application that scale back to 0? Then you can follow those tutorials for for background processing and for microservice applications as well. And maybe Scott, we can go on the overview here just to explain the main points here. But
George,
it's all
can I
about
quickly interrupt? Sorry, can we just zoom in on the text a little bit? We've just had a request to have this. Great, thank you.
Yep, that sounds good. Thanks for requesting that. We appreciate. If you want to ask, if people want to ask, Vic, join us. Thanks, Vic. Vic's helping a lot on documentations. We did some videos together. Vic Perana now is a CSA from Microsoft. Scott, I think those are the main points we can review here. Like we're talking about, the scaling. The revisions are something big as well. It's not just one version that you deploy. And that's a big difference from Azure Container Instance. Azure Container Instance is like a base service where you just deploy a container. It's like a background process that you run and stop. On the container apps, because more based on application microservice, we bring in like revisions, and you can even have multiple revisions running at the same time. And those revisions, you can even do like split the traffic between those revisions, so like A/B deployment or blue-green deployments or canary deployments, where you can even have both versions running at the same time. I think the only service we could do that was App Service. You could do some splitting as well. And that's the main difference from all the service revisions.
The other great one is that you can set up a HTTP ingress and not have to worry about any other infrastructure. So it's like straight out of the box. You can set up your ingress without having to worry about any of the other Azure services just for container apps. So container apps can solely, you can configure your application from beginning to end and not have to worry about any other Azure infrastructure on the outside of it.
Yeah, Ingress is big because, there is a cost. Like even Azure Functions, there is a cost for that. There's some configurations have to do it. Here now, it's just out of the box. You can say that if you want external traffic. And the big difference here is like the ingress can be internal. There's only internal traffic. There's no, expose it externally. Or you can say, for microservice, if you have multiple microservice running on what we call container apps environment. Okay, for you to be able to create a container app, you have to create a container app environment first. Very similar to app service environment. Or we create that like hosting that we call container app environment. And very soon, I think probably the next couple of weeks, you're going to be able to connect this environment to a virtual network. Okay, you can bring your virtual network, and your containers, your pods will be running, your container apps will be running inside like a VNet. And that could be completely isolated from the world. And, And even like that, you have an ingress controller where all the traffic is coming from that ingress controller, and will be the internal load balance to the pods. And the scaling, Scott, is based on the revisions as well. Okay, you can do scaling by revision, and you can split the traffic as well. And what more here? You can also connect your registry. It could be Azure Container Registry, could be any external registry, could be our on-premise container registry, could be Docker Hub. And in Kubernetes, we also have ours to care about secrets. And we kind of create a layer on top of that for secrets, where you can manage your secrets on the container app itself. Then you can also.
I think if anyone, I think if anyone's ever tried to set any of these things up in Kubernetes themselves with all these functionality that you get straight out of the box here, there's quite a bit of work involved in all this configuration, especially with like splitting traffic, with Ingress, everything logging out to where you need to with auto scaling. To get this all working in Kubernetes, there's like quite a fair bit of configuration and applications that you need to pull together to make this work, like Keta, a service mesh, a few other bits and pieces like an Ingress controller. So all this is given to you out of the box here, which I think is like fantastic. And as I said, it gives customers the flexibility to have like more advanced Kubernetes like functionality without having the overhead of having to admin all of it or understand how it all works.
Yeah, Scott, exactly. And I just check here my Azure Portal. That's one container environment and container app that I created before. And you can see now I have two new resources, one called Container App Environment, another called Container App. And if you go on the container environment, the virtual network is not here yet, but to be soon, where your environment to be connected on a virtual network. And you can see all apps being deployed on this environment. Means that all the apps deployed on the same environment, they can talk with each other. And that's where DEPA and microservice, that will be easier to talk between those applications. And if you go on the application I created here, this one is the one that I'm playing with the Azure DevOps agent as a background. Don't try now, it's something I'm trying at the moment. But you can see now you can have secrets managed from here. Means you can use ARM templates, you can use Bicep. Even Pulumi is already available. Terraform is not yet. Yep, Pulumi from day one. Bicep is as well. The community already created some examples using Bicep. And you can manage all these things because ARM templates are working. Bicep is based on ARM templates, and it's very easy now to use from day one. Pulumi, Bicep to create those infrastructures. And as you can see, I have my Azure DevOps access token as a secret. I have no ingress controller because it's just a background application running there, just disable. But I could have enabled my ingress and have internal, external traffic, and open. Here I'm not opening a port. I'm just telling the port of the container app that I'm going to send the traffic. In this case, I don't have ingress. Revision management, like we said, that's a big difference from the other service, where if I have multiple versions of revisions, I could do like a traffic split. Very simple on the portal. If I open one revision, you're going to be able to see the scaling and DEPA as well. In this case, DEPA is disabled. I'm just using the scaling. And the scaling that I'm using is Azure Pipeline. What I mean, KDA allows a metric where I can look on my pipeline, queue, and based on how many jobs I have waiting, I'm going to create another container app to process that pipeline. Okay, and that's what we call self-hosted agents on Azure DevOps. You have the same on GitHub Actions as well. but I don't think you have GitHub Actions yet on Kado. And that's how that works. I'm using a custom scaler, and I have just to set some environment variables and metadata here. And that works. And the nice thing, Scott, if I go back for template or back, let's see, scaling overview. Oh, probably now I have to go revision. Yep, see replica 0. I'm scaling to down, means I'm not paying anything.
Yep. And that's the perfect thing for this is that, yeah, you can have your application running, scaling to 0. And the beauty of Kado is there's so many metrics plugins that you can start to tie these together with other services or applications and have this like burstful of your Kubernetes cluster or other infrastructures that you're running for applications that don't need to be sitting there all the time. As long as Kado can get the metric to spin it up, you can spin it back down to 0,
Yep.
which is amazing.
It is, and there is another thing that's at the moment we have, log analytics as a log analytics integration. Means that I can get, probably don't have any log here, but let's 7 days. I can get logs from my applications here. In this case, for example, that was a long time ago. Let's get something new. See, in this case was a log from my Azure DevOps agent saying that the job was completed. Then we have logging, and you can use anything from log analysis to create like a dashboard. Is out of the box here done. Another thing is just the continuous deployment as well, Scott. There's integration with GitHub Actions. And once you deploy the application, if you want to just keep deploying from your Git repo, then it's kind of a GitOps, just we call the continuous deployment. You just configure your registry, and every time that you have a new, revision, what this thing is doing is going to get, your the Docker file from your GitHub, from your repository, is going to build the container, is going to push for your container registry, and it's going to redeploy with the new version. It's kind of a GitOps approach that you have here. And I'm pretty sure that's going to be getting even better experience on the portal at some stage, but is already working as well.
Now, George, oh, sorry, just a question. Does it create a new revision for you when it sees a new change in the Docker file?
That creates a new revision, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's nice.
So automatically, yeah.
Yep. And there's another thing in revision that you can have a single revision, you can have multiple revisions. When you create a container app, you can say, no, I just want a single one. Means that you can never have like 2 running at the same time. The new revision, the next container app will be deployed. The old one going to wait probably the 6 seconds to scale down. And that's the only problem we're having now with the agents, because the agents could be a long-running process, and we don't have this on container apps yet, maybe in a feature. And keep in mind, if you want to use container apps for Azure DevOps agents, maybe don't scale based on the queue, based on something else, and maybe you can scale down overnight or use some different way to scale that. But I'm doing some testing with the queue from the pipeline because I want to find a way to, even if I have a walk around for a moment. And there's a lot of new blogs from the community coming every single day. Yeah, we appreciate the help from the community on this service. But that's pretty much that, the service. Anything else, Scott, that we want to maybe, let's see if I have any question here. Will container apps replace AKS in feature? I would say no, that's not to replace AKS. We say container apps is the entry point now to learn containers and to start using containers. You don't have to jump for AKS, on day one. Try container apps first. learn Dockerfile, learn containers, learn like microservice, like event-driven scaling, like MTOS for communication, Sidecar, all these things that come on CADA, on DEP. Once you learn that, if you want to go another step, I would say then you can look on AKS. If you're missing something that we don't have, maybe you need AKS. Otherwise, it's a good start point.
Yeah, I would say if any service kind of gets replaced, it possibly could be ACI, but ACI will still stick around Azure because like there's a lot of other services that use it, so it's like will be more of a back-end building block. But yeah, this is more to fix the ACI problem, that it didn't allow you to scale at all or do anything super complex or more than a single container. So this is allow folks to start running like real world workloads easily with mutual TLS, with like proxying, service discovery, all that goodness, without having to go into installing this all into Kubernetes. As we mentioned before, there's a lot of knowledge that you need to do in a production environment to get all this stuff working in AKS, and there's a lot of choices you need to make. Like, so you got heterogeneous scaling mechanism. What metrics are you going to use? Are you going to use Prometheus? Are you going to use something else? Are you going to use multiple? What ingress controller are you going to use? What service mesh are you going to use? What business logic do you need in the service mesh? There's a whole heap of knowledge that you need to know that would be quite hard to get like running on day one when you're trying to learn just to get an application up and running. So this is where we see this product fit. It's for folks, but there's also a use case that we have internally, and also external would have it, that we have a small application that needs to scale, but we don't want to run a Kubernetes cluster for it, and we need it segregated from like a pre-existing Kubernetes cluster with applications for security reasons. Instead of spinning up a new cluster, we can just use container apps now. And there's a use case for that as well. So there's fringe use cases for people that are already using AKS to implement their AKS clusters as container apps. But yeah, I definitely don't see it as replacing AKS at all.
Yeah, and the team just created a new documentation, Scott. I don't know if you saw that. Jeff Holland just published that comparing container apps with all the Azure container options. Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for that. We got feedback from the community, and we included a new page on the documentation. And we compare with container instance, app service, functions, Spring Cloud as well, and even AKS. And you can go and compare yourself.
So, George, we've got a question from the people in chat. Can you please provide use case examples between AKS and container apps?
Okay. I think, container apps now, if you're not going to be able, like on AKS, you pretty much can do anything, like Scott was saying. You can do any configurations. They can bring logs, metrics. They can bring better, either like container network configuration as well. Even like when you create AKS class, you can have kubelet, you can have CNI, that's Azure CNI. You can bring like Calico, you can bring different ways to do policies. Or you're not going to be able to do that on container apps. Container apps, you have, one option, one set of options that we define as to be more useful for microservice and for applications. And we create a service around these. Even if you look here, you're going to see those options on the container app. You're not going to be, if that's not good enough for you, then you have to look on AKS.
So one use case that I've seen it used for, and this is something that the CSE's worked on, for something that used to run in ACI, is like we've got a blue-green cluster deployment mechanism for AKS. And we need that to sit outside an AKS cluster, obviously, because it's deploying new clusters. And that's a perfect use case for this. Another use case I've seen for it is that you could do batch processing outside your AKS cluster for resource constraint and only have to pay. Another use case would be that I have an application that I don't need running all the time. So it could be something like a payment service. So if I have to hit it and do some processing of payment before, and it doesn't need to be running, I could have my core application running on my AKS cluster. And then I could have my security concerns locked down with my Calico network policy, my Ingress, I'll just say we're running Istio for sake, and I've got Pilot with a whole heap of policy around that, open policy agent to lock down to make sure like things like the application is not the container has not come from upstream, and all this. I've got all this regulatory components in my AKS cluster. I could then send the batch process out to do some manipulation in container apps, and then send it back because I don't want to put resource constraints on my AKS cluster, and I don't want to be paying for another cluster all the time. I just need this application to do something when I need it to do it. It doesn't need to be running. So that could be a use case for container apps as well. Or you could just like we've said, be new to containers. You have an application that has like 3 or 4 pods, and you want to run it on container apps first, because getting into Kubernetes is hard. Like we said, to deploy all these things into Kubernetes, you have to understand service mesh, Envoy, networking, Ingress. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to know, and like barrier to entry on that is fairly high. So this allows customers to get up and running fairly quickly without having to deploy AKS.
Yeah, Scott, and I like to compare with Azure Spring Cloud. If you never saw Azure Spring Cloud, it's pretty much, I think maybe Container App can become something like Azure Spring Cloud for Java applications, where you're using Spring Boot microservice. And if you are doing Spring Boot Java application microservice, probably Spring Cloud is the best option for you. And what they have all those things integrated on the service, but behind the scenes like Kubernetes running there. Okay, and that's deployed on top of Kubernetes. And if in some stage you can get, even closer to something like Spring Cloud, yeah, okay, and the difference container apps, we're trying to use the open source options like Kada, Dapper, but it's going to grow legs in some stage, and probably it's going to get even closer and closer to AKS, but never it will be like AKS. Like storage, Scott. Okay, the way that you manage secrets, for example, if you don't want to use secrets inside your container apps, you want to that as external, secret management. If you want external storage, things like that, we don't have on container apps yet. Then we need use case like that. You still need like AKS. And I really like it, Spring Cloud. If you can, container app can get closer to something like Spring Cloud for microservice, you pretty much can use that for anything, but still like a Spring Boot microservice application. Okay, still for one kind of application, Java. And now you can even deploy .NET applications on that as well. Okay, Spring Cloud, you can deploy .NET applications.
Yeah, that's the one thing container apps is it's opinionated about what it does and how it does it to make usability for the end user simpler. But if you don't agree, or if you have use cases that are away from that and you need to change a whole bunch of stuff, then AKS is a much better option for you because you have the flexibility to do so. Where on container apps, it's like that's what the service does. But as I said, it's for the use case that it has, I believe that it's one of the best things that we've released in the container space for a long time. And it gives flexibility for customers to run, to not have to run multiple small AKSs for stuff that possibly doesn't belong on Kubernetes.
That's true. And another thing is Azure Container Instance. A lot of people asking the difference with Azure Container Instance. because Azure Containers is more like, like a building block. You don't have things like scaling, load balancing, like you have, ingress controller, you have CADA, and certificate management. That's all done by Container App. And on AKS, you have to do that yourself. You have to manage many of those things yourself or install something. And on ACI, if you want to have 5 container instances, you have to create 5 containers, deploy 5 times. It's not that concept of scaling and the revisions as well. Then there's a big difference. That's why the focus is for that. Another thing people ask is, I have app service. Should I move from app service to container app? Probably not, because most of people use app service as a web application, to deploy web applications. If that's working, keep running there. If you're going to start using microservice, probably container apps now is the best option for you. Why? The way that we scale. Okay, on app service, you need 1 instance of app service for each instance of your container. And because microservices are very small, like small memory, small footprint, that will be running better on container apps, because just the way that we're scaling on container apps, not just because it's serverless, but the way that we scale is more like cloud native. But for web front ends or monolithics, probably app service will be easier to deploy there, because it's not going to be scaling much. It'll be like a single, more scaling up, not scaling out. Then app service probably will be easier for you to maintain there. And keep in mind that you have container apps have like free. Scott, you can have like 100 hours memory and 50 hours CPU for free, and you have like 2 million requests, if I'm not wrong, free per month. Then give a go, Then
Yep,
that's a big one. But
sorry, definitely try it out. And if you have any questions or need to know anything, or you've hit any rough edges, please just reach out to me and George. We can either help you or put you in touch with the folks that can. But yeah, definitely try it out. I'm super excited for container apps. Yeah, I think it's really, really great. As I said, the amount of tech that's being put in there that is abstracted to make it easy for users to run is amazing, and I think the team's done an awesome job on it.
Yeah, Scott, we're getting close to the end. If anyone watching want to ask more questions, be free. I think the only topic we also decided to discuss today was the open service mesh. That's coming to version 1 now.
Yep.
And I recommend you test that with AKS. Now you can install open service mesh as an add-on for AKS, and then I recommend to just give a go. And now, like Scott was saying, that's a more Kubernetes use case where you need like a full service mesh. And open service mesh is donated to CNCF. Is using service mesh interface, means that it's a single way to manage. Means that any tool that supports service mesh interface or any control plane, you'll be able to connect on the open service mesh control plane and manage that, because you're using service mesh interface. But service mesh, you can bring pretty much traffic shifting as well that you have on container app. You can have multi-TLS for end-to-end service communication. See, those things we are enabling that on container app as well, without using a full service mesh, or just abstracting that from the user. But service mesh is more than just traffic shifting on that. If you wanna talk about that's got the difference between service mesh.
So in container apps, we're using it on by proxy and looking at traffic shifting and stuff. And that's where I'll get back to the point that it was opinionated and it works really well for a certain use case. And that'll cover the 90% of the use cases for that particular service, I believe. They've done a really good job there. But if you're a more advanced user and you have things like policy that you need to apply to the service mesh, as well as mutual TLS and a whole bunch of other things, Those interfaces are not there in container apps yet. Will they come there? I'm not even sure on if it's on the roadmap. So that's when you have to start moving away to AKS, and then you have something that's fully configurable, you manage, and then you're able to do things like certificate rotation. You're allowed to do policy on traffic shifting. You can do a whole bunch of policy on anything you want, really. Because it gives you fine-grained control, and a service mesh is not opinionated at all. It expects you to understand what your needs are, and then be able to configure it to those particular needs.
Yeah, I agree. I think we have to make sure that we understand the difference and what a full service mesh brings to a Kubernetes cluster. Then we maybe never going to be able to provide everything on a fully managed service. But the nice thing when you have this on AKS as add-on is that we manage the installation. Like you don't have to install, and we're going to maintain the open source mesh running on your cluster. The only thing you have to do is like create the policies and using CRDs on AKS, cluster source definitions of the service mesh, or you can following the service mesh interface. There's a lot of tools now that support service mesh interface, and that's what we're trying to do. But there are new things coming, Scott, on OSM that we're excited, like multi-clusters as well. You can use it like your open policy agent for the policies. You can manage policy on the Ingress as well.
And the good thing about Open Policy Agent is if it's backed by Open Policy Agent on the open source, that means Azure Policy will plug into it from a service side point of view, because we implemented Azure Policy over Gatekeeper or Open Policy Agent, which is the Kubernetes version of its Gatekeeper. So if you are looking for something where you can tie your policy engines together, and you might have policies around multiple services, not just AKS, then you have a single pane of glass for your security team to start looking at your how you're introducing policy, policy change management, and what's been applied and what's not. So that's super powerful as well for OSM.
Yeah, and watch the roadmap, because they bring even Windows containers. They bring that mode classes that you'll be a game changer. You can manage across. Another thing is what they're bringing for VMs. You can using Open Service Mesh on VMs. Then you can talk with a VM now. And if you have a legacy application that you still need like a VM, now you're going to be able to have Open Service Mesh there. Then you can talk with a VM.
Yeah, with mutual TLS on both sides, and you can
on both sides.
Do a whole heap of goodness there. So that's where, yeah, I believe that like if you need more advanced features, like George is talking about, like gluing together multiple service types, whether it be VMs and containers, then a full-blown service mesh is something that would be a must probably for you. And that's something that in container apps would be very hard to support, because it's so opinionated and it's meant to be simple for folks to use. So if you start to really get to the advanced use cases of what you would want to do in cloud infrastructure, especially around the security side, then AKS would be a lot better. If you have like multiple policies, and you might have policies around, say, VMs, and then you want to have policies around like your service mesh, and then policies around like containers, then you could use Azure Policy, and your security team that could be their pane of glass to look at to do all your auditing and change management around that. Therefore, like AKS would be a far stronger candidate. But that's when we're starting to get into really complex architectures. And I think that's the difference between container apps and like using AKS again, is AKS is meant for complex architectures, and container apps is meant not for simple architectures like that you don't want to use AKS for, because like it doesn't need all that complexity and overhead.
Yeah, that's true. And keep in mind that container app is going to grow. There are some things on the roadmap, like managed identity. I think is one of them. People asking about managed identity. I think some comments about some init containers, but look, we're trying to avoid. You're not deploying container app using a YAML file like a Kubernetes YAML file, and keep in mind that we are abstracting these. Then those features, yeah, we know more, about most of those features like managed identity, custom domains. Init containers, you can have multiple containers. Okay, you can have not like a init container that run like a job and stops, but you could have like a separate containers if you want. You could deploy 4 or 5 containers in one container app inside the same pod. Then keep in mind there's some GitHub hub for issues, and documentation is just going to grow. And watch the community and ask us, ping us anytime on Twitter or on LinkedIn, and probably Twitter will be days away. And then we're happy to help. I think that's it for today, Scott. Those 3, open source mesh, container apps, and Bosom, very exciting things. But there are so many announcements from Ignite. I just leave the book of news that was published with all the news from Ignite. If you are interested to have a look, it's more than just cloud native, but good luck.
Also,
so many things.
Could you post a link of the differences between container apps and the other Azure services? I think that could be handy for folks in chat if they want to read further about that. I know we flashed it up on the screen briefly, but yeah, I've had a few people ask me about that. So if we can put that one in the chat, that'd be great too, please. And now we'll throw it to chat. Is there any questions?
Let me have a look if there's any questions. Looks like that not. Yeah, the question is more about the service, that comparison with container app and AKS. And someone watching the recording, so yeah, keep in touch and send a lot of questions. We want your feedback and how can we improve the service going forward. And I was quite amazed with the feedbacks that I got so far from the community, and even some Microsoft partners asking, how can you approach that? But keep in mind, still in public preview, still early days. If there is anything that you maybe need some support, then you think that you can use in production, I'm not sure if you're going to give any support, but keep in touch if you're a partner. Maybe in some stage, probably next couple of months, we're going to be able to give some, support. Normally, when it's public preview, we give you support, but it's not like on, we cannot guarantee like you're going to give you a feedback in 4 hours, but we're giving some support as well. And VNet is coming, virtual network. That's people ask a lot. Okay, don't have to ask. It's not on the roadmap. It's just going to be rolling the deployment next few days or week or 2 weeks, and you'll be available. And you have just available in 2 regions at the moment. I think Canada and West Europe, or I forgot another one. Yeah, it's not in US. This is on Europe and not in Canada. And in some stage, you'll be available in more regions as well. But it's working. Yeah, it's very nice, solution. And I have tested with background application microservice, even with Azure DevOps self-hosted agent. I think that's it, Sarah. If you're there, I don't think I have any more questions. We can finish here.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Scott. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. And thank you to you both for adding all of those links to the comment section as well for the attendees today. Thanks, everybody, for engaging with us in the comment section and tuning in. We'll leave it there for today. So thank you very much and have a good rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning. And we'll see you next time for another Microsoft Reactor live stream event. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Bye-bye. Thanks, Sarah.